It's my first look at the running back position on DraftKings and FanDuel for Week 12, and we're starting right now. It's been Christian McCaffrey every single week this year. So 10-5, his price hasn't moved again. I do think that the spot against New Orleans is not ideal from a matchup perspective, but do we really care with Christian McCaffrey? I think his quarterback had one of the worst performances of the entire year with 4 picks. I guess he threw over 300 yards, but didn't throw a touchdown. CMC still got 30 points. Crazy. Joseph Fraud, he had CMC as his number 2 play last week. Number 2. That stuff he's probably talking about the Instagram. I post my top 5 plays on Instagram every week. Those are not in order, by the way. More or less just trying to give you guys an idea of some of the guys that I like at each position, man. CMC at 10-5, there was no way I wasn't playing him last week. I'll make that very clear. I do think that this spot against New Orleans on the road, it's a pretty low total for sure. The volume should be there for that's goes without saying. Total yards over the last 4 games: CMC, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon at 5,900. Pretty nice total yards over the last 4 games. Tough spot against Pittsburgh. We'll have to dig into that one a little bit more. So past the McCaffrey tier, I don't think we need to waste a ton of time on McCaffrey. What did you guys end up doing with Fournette last week? I didn't have much Fournette. His price has gone down to 7,300, so that's an interesting scenario at least. Let's try and get an idea of what I want to see what his usage was through the air last week from a target perspective. So last week he only had 8 attempts on the ground. Yikes. But he did have 7 targets, 34. So I mean, floor game from Fournette. I didn't think Fournette at 7,900 was really in play last week relative to his volume. Has been a little bit. It's been on the decline, to be completely honest, over the last 3 weeks or so. He's still playing a ton of snaps. I will say his receiving game and his receiving usage has stayed relatively constant. He's a guy that hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns this year. We know Chark just went completely nuts in week 11 with Foles back. So Fournette was a little bit on the back burner, I think, as far as that game plan. But we could see him coming back and rebounding here. Tennessee's a team that's pretty strong against the run, 4th against the run this year, but 22nd against running backs in the passing game. So if we see his usage kind of stay where it's at in the passing game, I don't think he's terrible. We'll have to kind of make our way through that. Steve in the chat was saying he slammed Fournette into his FanDuel lineup last week, and then Foles drops back over 50 times. Yeah, I didn't see that coming either, man. I actually kind of liked, we talked about the Jacksonville stack as one that might be super contrarian in GPP. So ended up thinking that was, potentially a decent spot for Foles. But yeah, man, really tough in cash and smaller field stuff to go there. Joe looked at me like the biggest fish when I asked about Lenny and Mac's ownership. I mean, I don't really play Mac very often. You guys know that about me. I think anyone that's watched my content knows that I definitely have a leak for the Derrick Henrys, the Nick Chubbs, those type of guys. I rarely play them. And it's not that they don't have the ceiling of these other guys, maybe they do. The tournaments that I play, single entry, smaller fields, I'm never going to play a guy that I can't even project for 2 catches. Just can't do it. So that said, this might be a rough week for me because Derrick Henry against Jacksonville, 30th against the run. Nick Chubb against Miami, 29th against the run. 32nd against running backs in the passing game. Miami has kind of taken that crown. So interesting for sure. 0 value this week. Yes, it's early in the week, but I'm with you. Someone in chat was saying that the 6,500 and below running backs look kind of yuck. All the more, I guess, reason to kind of pay up for some of these guys. I'm not seeing a ton of, outside of the usual suspects at the running back position. Does Brian Hill get in the end zone this week against Tampa Bay? I understand that it's a horrendous matchup, but after he doesn't get in last week, I'm not projecting him for a ton of touches or anything. But so right now I have him for not a lot of touches, so I guess he's not in play. But I always think that those post hype, post chalk guys, the next week, at least in large field stuff, throwing one lineup out there with those guys would make some sense. Someone's asking about Le'Veon. Let's talk about Le'Veon. So 6,400. Okay. Oakland, the team that at least is below average against the run. Decent usage. We know he'll be used in the passing game. Yeah, I could see Bell end up being a decent value for sure. At that price point, it just seems like the ceiling is relatively low with this guy. There hasn't been a lot of touchdown upside there. Just this team for the Jets hasn't been scoring a ton. But on a slate where it might not be great, grabbing some usage there and some nice volume, you could see that. Kamara. So this ended up being, I guess, the big question of the week, and I think this is one we'll be asking ourselves is Kamara last week. He was kind of significantly cheaper than he is this week, but against Carolina, a team that can be beat on the run 32nd against the run. Is it just a Latavius game? I have no idea. Latavius, it hasn't really been as much of a 1-2 punch as in previous years. So I don't know. I think Kamara is still squarely in play here. I think you can still project him for a decent amount of raw points, of course. I don't know, 8,200, tough price tag there. Cleveland using Chubb like Sony Michel ahead of the Miami game is so tilting. Yeah. That's not a guy that you want to be trotting out there if he's just going to have the Sony Michel role. I mean, if he gets 2 touchdowns and hits the bonus, great, you're there. 8,100 is a really tough price tag for a guy that catches 0 passes. I definitely prefer Kamara if I'm trying to choose between those guys. Yeah, 10 catches last week. Crazy. The only potential value on running back is Thursday Night Football. Interesting. Looks pretty thin here, guys. What do we think about Saquon? 7,900. Brutal total. I mean, I don't actively want to just like avoid Chicago's defense because I don't think they're an elite defense by any means, but they are above average in these rushing categories. This team is skewed towards the pass a decent amount. 7,900 just seems really expensive for Saquon, and I hate saying that because I love Saquon as a player. Loved his usage. His usage just hasn't been elite this year, and I'm not sure exactly why. If we're talking from a ceiling perspective, I still think it's probably McCaffrey and Kamara ahead of him, as crazy as that sounds. So Saquon doesn't have 20 carries in 4 straight games. His targets have been just okay, but I mean, if you even just compare him to someone like Fournette's touches are still like at worst the same through the air, which is crazy. This is a really tough. This might be one of the tougher running back slates I've ever seen this year, based on the pricing and based on some of the guys that we have. Really interesting. Someone's asking about Miles Sanders if Howard's out. I could see it. I don't actually like. I stand behind. I still think that Miles Sanders was a pretty decent play last week. He played a ton of snaps. Obviously, he's 5K this week against Seattle. The matchup is basically middle of the pack. Like if he ends up seeing a big kind of, if we end up seeing Howard out again, and we see kind of him take out some of the maybe 10 of these touches or so, and we can get Miles Sanders around that 20 touch range. Oh yeah, that could be the value play that we're waiting for. I could see it. Joe Mixon at 5,900. I mean, this guy's been getting volume. I mean, definitely late on the Joe Mixon train this year. Wasn't really firing at him early in the season. 15 carries last week after seeing 30 the week before. That's the kind of volatility I'm talking about. Like, I know he got there with a touchdown. Only played like half the snaps last week too. So not so much on Mixon, but at the top, it's super ugly. Kris Carson against Philly, maybe. Another guy that just doesn't have a great role through the air. So someone mentioned Samuels if James Conner is out. That's one to watch for sure. Fantastic matchup against Cincinnati. Like we've been targeting Cincinnati with running backs a lot. That's part of the reason Josh Jacobs was good in play last week. 31st against running backs in the passing game. Could be a great spot if we get Samuel. What's Samuel's price here? I'm gonna have to scroll down because I'm obviously not projecting him for a ton of touches yet. Wow, he's still 7,200. Crazy. So basically, you're gonna be looking at him versus like Leonard Fournette, or even like the much more talented Saquon for a little bit more. I don't know. That's tough. I was hoping he'd be cheaper. 7,200. They just left him up there. Yeah, interesting. Lindsay versus Buffalo. What were they saying as far as coach speak? Someone in the chat's talking about what they've been talking. He outsnapped Royce 2-1 last week. Let's look at Lindsay. Lindsay's someone that definitely held up over a much larger role last year for sure. Tough total. Buffalo's a team you can run on though. And I mean, Lindsey, if he does end up getting some usage in the passing game, maybe I could see it at 5,200. I think that the value play that stands out to me is still probably Miles Sanders in that range if we get Howard out. But if we don't, we might have to take a deeper look at some of these guys. David Montgomery, 5,500. I mean, we've been through this before, right? That's just another passing game that's just not one we want to go anywhere near. Another offense we not want to go anywhere near. He's not being used in the passing game is what I meant by that. But tough slate at running back. I think just make when you have a slate like this, I get that it's not a fantastic matchup for CMC, but I feel pretty good about just paying up for that floor, I think. If you're looking to take your game to that next level, I go live every Sunday morning on Twitch. Come hang out with us, twitch.tv/Joe Holka. And if you want to learn more about how to be a profitable DFS player, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. In the meantime, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you live on stream.